Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name's Madison. If you're new here, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I really appreciate you. And if you're not new here, hello, how are you? I hope you're doing well since the last time I saw you. Obviously you can tell by the title of this video, we're talking about books yet again. I have always been an adamant reader. I have always been into books since I was little. I've been reading since I was little. Cam Jansen, Junie B. Jones, Katie Kazoo. If anybody remembers Katie Kazoo, please let me know because I feel like not a lot of people read Katie Kazoo. Those were my go-to books when I was little. I loved reading. Reading was my thing. After I got older a little bit, probably starting in high school, I stopped reading as much kind of after my sophomore year. During those years, I was heavy into my Wattpad phase, reading a few books here and there that were physical books. But after that, I kind of fell off. You know, I got busy doing other things and I didn't really read as much as I had in the past. And then obviously Book Talk came around and I actually initially got back into reading when I discovered BookTube. Steph Borer is actually the one that got me back into reading. I decided to give one of her book recs a try and the rest is history. Like, I've been reading ever since, which was about a year ago, I want to say, maybe the beginning of 2022. I started picking up reading again and I'm so glad I did. Literally one of my heavy hobbies now. Like, I don't know what I would do without reading. Reading, I think, has really done wonders for my mental health. It's helped me stay off social media as much. It's helped put me in a better headspace. I feel like it just makes me happy, and I feel like if I can advocate for reading, I want to push somebody to read a book, any book they want. I hope something good comes out of that if I can convince somebody to pick up a book and read. And so I thought that was what I would do today. I thought today would be a good day to discuss 10 books that made me fall in love with reading again, that got me back into reading. I hope in this big stack of books there's something that you find interesting and that pushes you to pick up a book and read, because it has changed my life for the better, and I hope it does that for you too. I think I'm going to start with series. I have 2 series in this stack and these series are pretty popular. I feel like if you've kind of got a foot in the door when it comes to book talk or like the reading world or whatever, you know what these series are. But when I tell you, like, these series deserve all the hype. Like, they deserve every single bit of hype they get. Like, they're literally so freaking good, and I just cannot stress that enough. Like, I know some people tend to shy away from books or series that are super popular or really talked about, but please, when I tell you these series are worth it, like, they're worth it. They're just worth it. I can't say anything else. They're just worth it and you have to read them. The first series is going to be the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. First of all, can we just talk about how the third book, I could only find the third book in hardcover and the other 2 are paperback. And I debated just buying the third book as a hardcover because, like, the way that book 2 ended, I had to keep reading and I could not wait to order a paperback and for it to get here so I could read it. So I just said whatever and bought the hardcover for the third book. But anyways, I don't read a lot of mystery. I don't read a lot of thrillers, but when I tell you I haven't read a mystery / thriller series yet that compares to A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. But the way Holly Jackson puts so much thought into the plot of her books is actually insane, like actually crazy. Like, every single little detail, you're like, as you're reading it, you're like, whoa, like how is she coming up with this stuff? And I believe she has one other book out that I just finished called 5 Survive, which is a standalone. That's not like the point of this video, but that one is really good as well. But this was the first thing that I ever read by Holly Jackson and it had me on the floor. I don't know if it's just because I'm not really a mystery girl. I'm not really, like, I don't read a lot of mystery. I don't read a lot of thrillers. These books are so good. So this is about Pip, and she decides to start investigating an unsolved case for her school project. And the unsolved case is actually about a girl who used to go to her school. Starts investigating, and she ends up finding out a lot of things, a lot of shocking things about this case, which eventually leads to other problems, other issues. It ends up just all coming back around, and that's what's, I think, the most shocking factor about the series itself, is it comes back full circle, but definitely not in the way that you expect it to. Like, I don't know if I'm just not good at predicting stuff, but I never would have guessed that the series would have ended the way that it did. I definitely 10 out of 10 recommend. Also, Pip and Ravi, I strive for a relationship like Pip and Ravi. Like, Ravi really gives ride or die. Like, Ravi holds a special place in my heart, always. I will say a lot of people didn't really like the way that book 3 ended. I kind of really liked the way book 3 ended. After reading 5 Survive, I kind of noticed that Holly Jackson tends to write her endings in a more broad and general way versus tying up every loose end. She kind of leaves the ending kind of up to the imagination to decide kind of how things play out for all of her characters. But I am a really, really big fan of Holly Jackson, and I highly, highly recommend this series, especially if you're just kind of getting your foot in the door when it comes to reading. Like, very, very easy, fast reads, and they keep your attention. My heart was racing. My heart was palpitating the whole time I was reading this series. The next series I decided to go with, y'all are not going to be surprised when I hold this series up. Like, but I have to throw it in there. It's just so freaking good. But if you are someone who is looking to get into fantasy, or to put your foot in the door with a fantasy series that, you know, isn't too confusing, it's the perfect starter series, in my opinion, when it comes to fantasy. I'm going to recommend you the ACOTAR series, which is basically a fantasy series about fae and humans. I've talked about this series on my channel before. I freaking love this series. Like, I don't really cry over books. I'm like, even sad books, I don't really cry over books. I just don't really get attached to characters like that. This series right here made me freaking like sob, like sobbing, literally sobbing, because I just after reading 4 books, you know, you kind of get a little bit attached. I don't know what it was about this series that made me so attached to the characters. I don't know if it was the hardships they went through or the relationships they developed, or like, I don't know what it was, but I was sobbing over this series, sobbing. And I don't think I'll ever recover from the series. I don't think I'll ever stop talking about it. I love it so freaking much. This is a really, really talked about series on TikTok, and I think honestly it deserves all the hype it gets. Literally, I think it deserves every good thing that's said about it. I have nothing bad to say about ACOTAR. I know for some people it's not really their cup of tea, or they think it's overhyped, but I seriously think if you think you might be into fantasy, this would be a really, really good starter series for you. The world building is not too difficult to keep up with. The names and stuff are not too hard to pronounce. I know that might sound like so stupid, but like, that's a thing for me. If the names are too hard to pronounce, like, I cannot get into it. Now we're going to go ahead and move on to standalones. I'm so excited. I love every single one of these books with my whole heart. The first standalone book that I want to talk about is called I'll Give You the Sun. Who is this by? It's called I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. She's a little beat up looking, but I've had her and I've loved her for some years now. I've had her since I was, I think, maybe a sophomore or junior in high school, so I've had her for some years. She stayed at the bottom of my backpack in high school, so that's why she's a little bent up at the corners, but it's okay. She's still beautiful all the same. I love the cover. I think the cover is so unique. It's literally just a quote from the book. It says, "We were all heading for each other on a collision course, no matter what. Maybe some people are just meant to be in the same story." This is the inside of it. It's just so colorful and fun. This book is a YA coming of age story, and something about a coming of age story is gonna fill a void in me every single time. There's just something about a coming of age story that just makes me feel so like complete and like less alone, and I feel like everybody could gain something from reading some sort of coming of age story. This is about fraternal twins. This is about a girl named Jude and a boy named Noah. They grew up being inseparable. They grew up being super close. They did everything together, and something ends up happening that changes all of that. They end up not being as close anymore, barely really speaking to each other, not really knowing anything about each other and what they're going through in their own lives. They just end up navigating their relationship as well as navigating life after these big changes and for the changes to come. I feel like I took away a lot from this book, especially when it comes to family and, you know, finding yourself at such a young age, figuring out how to navigate loss and grief and all of these things. But I highly recommend this for anybody who might be wanting to get into reading. It'll tear you apart and then put you back together. So do with that what you will, right? Do what you will with that. Do with that what you will. Is that? I don't know. You get what I'm trying to say. The next book I want to talk about actually is another coming of age story. I actually don't have the physical copy with me. I loved this story. I think when I read it, I was at a time in my life where I was too young to really understand what it meant completely, but I still loved it nonetheless. I thought it was a beautifully written story. The next book I want to talk about is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. It's about two teenage Mexican-American best friends, and it's a coming-of-age novel that's basically about their friendship and navigating their struggles with their ethnic and racial identities, sexuality, and family relationships. And overall, it was a really beautifully written story. I would highly recommend it to anybody who might be struggling with the same things. It's definitely a story that makes you feel less alone. That's why I said I love coming of age stories. Coming of age stories will always do something for me that no other genre can, and I highly recommend it. Next is going to be a rom-com. This is one of the books that, like I said, that first got me back into reading. I think this is maybe the second or third book that I picked up when I started reading again, and it's A For Aunties by Jessie Q. Satano. This is basically about a girl named Meddy who ends up going on a blind date that her mom and her aunties set up for her, and she ends up killing her blind date, and that then results in her aunties and her mom having to help her cover up the murder, but they are also working a wedding, and they end up having to try to cover up this murder and hide the body at the wedding. This is one of those books that makes you laugh out loud. It's just, when it comes to family dynamics and family relationships, this is such a relatable story, and it's so funny. I think that's part of the reason why it's so funny, is because it's so relatable when it comes to family dynamics and family relationships. I was literally laughing out loud literally the whole time I was reading it, and there's actually, I believe, a sequel to this book that I've been meaning to read. I believe it's called For Aunties and a Wedding, and I need to read it. I love this book so much, so I'm so excited to eventually getting around to doing that. It's been on my TBR for like a year now. It has a subplot of romance, but that's not the main thing about it, but I highly recommend this to anybody who just loves to laugh. I couldn't put it down. Like, I needed to know what happened the whole time. I was like, oh my god, like, oh, this is so funny, but like, what's gonna happen? Like, oh my god. Definitely pick this one up if you're thinking about getting back into reading, or if you're thinking about picking up reading as a hobby. The next book is going to be We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I've heard mixed reviews about this book, but I absolutely loved it. I loved it so much. It was so good. The plot twist was the main thing that I thought really gave the book the oomph that it needed. Like, I was not expecting the ending. I was not expecting it to turn out the way it did. When I finished the book, all I could do was look and stare. All I could do was look and stare at my wall. I didn't know what else to do. I was like, what the heck? Like, I did not see that coming. So this book is about the Sinclairs. More specifically, it's about Cadence Sinclair. Cadence is part of the Sinclair family, and the Sinclair family is very rich, very pristine. The whole family gets together every summer and stays on a private island that their grandparents own. And one summer, Cadence gets into an accident, and she ends up losing her memory, not really remembering what happens, and basically this whole book is about her slowly gaining back her memories, finding out what happened, why it happened. And when I tell you, what happened was insane, and I did not see it coming. Like, I love this book so much, and I highly recommend it to anybody who, like I said, kind of likes a little bit of mystery, kind of likes a good plot twist. Like, this book was really, really good. Highly recommend. The next book I want to talk about is called What Kind of Girl by Alyssa Scheinmel. This is about two best friends who are both dealing with different things. One of them is dealing with relationship violence, and one of them is dealing with really, really bad anxiety. And this book basically this book just talks about how each of them is coping and navigating through these different issues that are very real in high school for a lot of people, actually. But when it comes to relationship violence, I feel like the author wrote it in a really, really amazing way. I also really, really enjoyed the way that she ended the book, and you'll know what I'm talking about if you decide to read this book. Please, by the way, check the trigger warnings before you read this book. It can get kind of heavy, but oh my god, like, I love this book so much. I really, really like the way that she ended the book. She ended it in a way that made it not about the things that weren't important when it comes to these types of issues that some people deal with. I highly, highly recommend this book. This book holds a special place in my heart. The next book I want to talk about is The Problem with Forever. This is about a girl named Mallory who ended up suffering from some childhood traumas, and ended up growing up to be mute. She ends up having to face her fears and speak in front of a class for one of her senior year projects. And obviously she went her whole life without having to speak, so she isn't really sure how she's supposed to do this. And it's really scary for her. And she ends up meeting a guy named Ryder, who was her childhood best friend. They ended up splitting up. They hadn't seen each other since they were kids, and they end up crossing paths, and he then agrees to help her figure out how to speak in front of her class for this senior year project. This is a childhood best friends to lovers trope. I highly, highly recommend it. This was such a good romance. I loved it so much, and there was some plot twists in there that I did not see coming. Kind of broke my heart a little bit, but we're not even going to get into that. If you love a good romance book, I highly recommend this book. This book was so good, and like I said, it's one of those books that rips your heart out and puts it right back in your chest. And the last two books I'm going to talk about are both by Mia Sheridan. I know, not too much, because I love Mia Sheridan. Like, she's just that girl. So the first book I want to talk about is Most of All You by Mia Sheridan. I've talked about this book on my channel before. I love this book. I read it in literally 2 days. It was so good. But before I even get into it, please check the trigger warnings before you read this book. This book has some heavy themes in it. So this book is about a girl named Crystal, and she, from a very young age, has always had to take care of herself and look after herself. She has gone her whole life being used and abused by other people, specifically men. She ends up meeting this guy named Gabriel who shows her that there are people out there like him who won't use and abuse her. Throughout the book, she just is navigating her trauma and coming to terms with the fact that there are people out there who aren't going to use and abuse her for their own personal gain, and she just is having a hard time with that. And this book is really about healing and self-discovery and also love. Like I said, I love Mia Sheridan. I don't know what it is about her writing. It's so easy to connect to her characters, which I think is why I love her books so much. I know that I'm gonna get a good romance book every time I read something by Mia Sheridan. I highly recommend this book to anybody. And the last book I want to talk about, I actually don't have my physical copy with me right now because I'm letting a friend borrow it, but the last book I want to talk about is Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan. Archer's Voice is the very, very first book I decided to read when I decided that I wanted to get back into reading. And when I tell you, it is the best decision I have ever made. I actually got that book recommendation from Steph Borer, and when I tell you she said it was a 5-star read, that girl was not lying. It was a 5-star read. It's about a man named Archer and a girl named Bree. It's a small town romance. So Bree basically moves to this small town in Maine, and she ends up meeting a man named Archer. A lot of people in town tell her that he's weird, like he had some crazy stuff happen to him when he was younger, and he's silent because of it, and everybody just kind of tiptoes around him, like doesn't really want to associate with him. Bree ends up becoming really intrigued by all of the stuff that she learns about Archer, and she ends up kind of being the only one that wants to and is associating with him, and she is basically just trying to figure out why he's silent, what happened to him, what made him become silent. I highly recommend Archer's Voice. I loved Archer's Voice. It's one of my favorite romances. It was a 5-star read for me. I will never be able to stop talking about it. If anybody were to ever ask me to recommend them a romance book, it would and always will be Archer's Voice. Those were all the books I have for you today, guys. I really hope you took a recommendation away from this video. I hope you found something in my ginormous stack of books that piqued your interest. I love reading so much. It's something that's always been a part of my life, and like I said, if I can inspire somebody to pick up a book and read, I want to be the one to do that. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you stayed till the end, thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate your support, and I'm glad that we can sit here and chat about books and share our love for books with each other. If you like this video, like, comment, and subscribe. And yeah, I'll see you guys whenever I see you guys next. Bye.